At this time, we're going to begin the services here in our chapel for Mr. David Ross Brimm. As we begin the service, I would ask if any of you has a cell phone or any other noise-making device, please turn them off at this time. Officiating the service here today are Dr. Mark Slutsky and Cantor David Landau from Eitz Chaim Center for Jewish Living in Glencoe.
We're here to honor David, to share and express our pain and our loss, and to comfort those who mourn. What makes this so difficult is that saying goodbye to David is so difficult because David is in each of us. I don't think there's any of us who did not get up this morning without a David joke, a David story, a David word, a David comment, a David barb in our heads. And I know if David were sitting here, he would already be turning to the person next to him and making a comment about what was going on already. So in a way, there is nothing more we can do to begin this process of honoring David than turning to the person next to you, even preferably if it's somebody you don't know, and share a David story, word, or barb. Let's take a minute and come together in that way that is so David. He was sending texts. Yes. And it's at a moment like this, David would say, "We're here for my funeral, let's get going." I met David at Eitz Chaim, but in so many ways I felt I knew him my whole life, because David had that extraordinary ability to connect with you through stories that somehow had meaning to you, even as they expressed his own experiences. And David conveyed something else. The more important something was in his life, and the more meaningful it was, the more he found a way to see the humor, the wit, and the irony in it. There is nothing that each of us can do to honor his memory than to incorporate that in each of us. David spent so much of his life struggling with illness. It was chronic, and then it was acute, and then it became chronic. And in so many ways, David lived his life walking through the valley of the shadow of death. But David did not walk alone, because no matter how he got that support, no matter how he got that rod and that staff, he somehow connected with it and made it a part of himself. So that David was actually sharing and giving to you at the very moment when he was getting from you the friendship, the support, and the encouragement that he built on himself. And in that sense, David struggled and struggled and struggled. And David found ways to find joy in every experience along the way. And when the doctors could offer no more, David understood that there was a completeness and a wholeness that came together with him and family and community. I cannot help but think that it was just a month ago that we were going back and forth with material he was writing for the Purim Spiel. And yet, when we're here today, we have those memories, but we're also confronted by human vulnerability, by the sadness that we have to face. And all we can do is turn to the tradition we have that gives us words of comfort, and to the family we have, and to the community we have, and the appreciation that we worked throughout life to build these things, and that at times like this, we want all who mourn to know we're all here for each other. Because when we're here for each other, we somehow give life to David and give comfort and strength to ourselves. David, the 23rd Psalm.
מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בינו דשא ירביצני, עמי מנוחות ינחלני, נפשי ישובב, ינחני ומגלי צדק, למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא הרע, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צוררי, תשענת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
The story of David begins at the beginning and will begin with his brother Rob.
I want to thank everyone for coming. I also want to thank Dr. Slutsky for really, in his opening remarks, giving me the right to really talk about my big brother David, because, as you said, he's within all of us. And I've said for many years that all my material is really just a derivative of David, that he exists. So I do want to say a few words. I'm up here speaking on behalf of my sisters, Jill and Kathy, and it's really to honor his memory, celebrate his legacy. Like I said, he was our big brother, and there's a lot of meaning in that, and I'll get into it in a bit. It's difficult in this short period of time to really capture the many facets of David, but I'm going to try and do my best. His legacy begins with his family, his devoted, beloved wife, Gloria, 49 years, last week when we were visiting David. We were reminiscing and talking about the fact that we met when I was 10 years old, so it's been a long journey together here. Of course, his pride and joy is his children, Jeremy and Rory, Melissa and Rob. It's really, his family is what David was all about. David was kind. He was the family protector. As a proud father, he always put others before himself. It was always, what can I do for somebody else? He was creative, a great writer, and he was always willing to help. Uncle David was the stop for my children if they needed their college entrance essays, their resumes. Yes, he helped them write them. You all do it too, get to have people to help, and he was always a big help to all of them. The real thing and his legacy is his sense of humor, because he always made you laugh. Every encounter, you walked away feeling better about yourself, and it's really, it's intertwined. When you think of David, it just brings a smile to your face. It was on full display at his wedding. As soon as the doors opened, David started walking down the aisle. There was a palpable buzz in the crowd. David's here, and David didn't disappoint. He walked down the aisle, waving to everybody as if he was walking the red carpet on his way to accept an Academy Award. At family simchas, and especially our annual Hanukkah party, all of my children couldn't wait to be around him because there was going to be something good was going to happen here. He was always the center of attention. At the recent bris of my grandson, by way of example, David leaned over to one of my sons and announced, "Oh, look, Shaky the Moyle is here." At our mother's funeral, when the rabbi went to cut his shirt for Kriya with a knife, he said, "Whoa, the last time a rabbi came up to me with a knife, he was cutting something else." That was David. But to really understand David, I feel it's important to talk about the forces which shaped his life. Our father passed away suddenly 56 years ago and left our mother a widow with 4 young children. David was 15, I was 9. I'll leave my sister's ages out because you'll reverse engineer their ages. Let's just say our mother of blessed memory was an original. She was tough, but at her core, she was vulnerable. We all knew this, and David was thrust into the role of being her support and a surrogate father to all of us. He assumed this lifelong role as a protector. It's really the source of him being a protector was from when he had to be the father figure in our house. So the loss today for us as siblings is really, we mourned our parents, but we're really mourning our third parent today. It's not to say that we didn't have a happy childhood. It was just, we became adults while we were still children, and it really shaped our lives more so for David than anyone else. David was a kid who always had a love of archaeology, paleontology, fossils, and all that stuff. A passion he shares with my son Yaakov, and they have a special bond over that. As kids, we would take a summer vacation. The family would load up in the family station wagon with the dog, and be on our way to our family to the destination of the vacation. We would take turns laying down in the back of the station wagon with the rear window rolled down. Our mother would barrel down the highway at sometimes exceeding speeds of 90 miles an hour. Any sudden stop, we would have been launched as if we were a ballistic missile out the back. It was different times then. On one of our family vacations, we went to South Dakota and the Badlands. David was in heaven. We stopped at all the rock shops along the way so we could collect fossils. As his collection grew, we came up with the brilliant idea, let's put them all in a box and lash it to the luggage rack on the top of the car. We didn't anticipate the rainstorm that ensued, and we watched in horror as his rocks came tumbling down the highway. He was using the finds from this expedition to add to his permanent collection, which was housed in our basement, where he had set up a replica of the Field Museum for this. For the low admission fee of 50 cents, each visitor was entitled to a complimentary shark's tooth, which he had purloined from Members' Night at the Field Museum. I think our cousins Lissa and Susan were the only ones who ever paid the 50 cents. And Lissa, I want to thank you for coming in from San Francisco. It's very meaningful for you to be here with us today. As my big brother, David took the time to introduce me to all of his comedy heroes: Groucho Marx, Mel Brooks, Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine, W.C. Fields. All were provocateurs, satirists that skewered the conventions of the world. David identified with all of them. Our mother was the Girl Scout troop leader in West Rogers Park for decades, which meant that every year our basement turned into a warehouse for the annual Girl Scout cookie drive. It also meant that the proceeds from the annual cookie drive funded the troop's annual camping trip, which meant that David was in charge of me and everybody else was out of the house. We went to the movies, we went to the Howard Theater for those who grew up in West Rogers Park. It was $1 to go to the movies there. And he let me stay out late at night running around with my friends. The whole arrangement almost came crashing down one year when I got picked up by the cops for curfew violation. Mercifully, they just dropped me off at the house without ever filing a report. In our 65 years, I don't recall a single fight that we ever had. We never had a bad word with each other. It's very uncommon. Big brothers bully their younger brother. There was none of that ever took place between us. I still want to ask my brother for mechila, for forgiveness, for anything I might have done or said or hurt or offended in any way. We're currently still in the middle of the Passover holiday, whereby we are commanded to have each generation read the Haggadah to recount the story of our exodus from Egypt. It connects the past to the present and the future. The first night Seder will never be the same for us moving forward, because it will commemorate David's yahrzeit. But as with the Haggadah, it will also allow us to continue to tell his story and connect each generation to him and the blessings of his memory. It is only fitting that I close with David's favorite line. Each conversation I've ever had with him, he always ended, "Next year in Jerusalem."
Son Jeremy.
So before I turn to what I wrote, you just reminded me of another great Passover story. Years and years ago, my sister must have been, I don't know, less than 2 years old, still in a crib, screaming, crying. We got through the first few hours of Seder, and she was not having any of it, just would not stop screaming. So Dad gave up and picked her up and took her back to her bedroom, put her in the crib where she continued to scream and yell. We get to the point in the service where we go and open the door for Elijah, and shortly after the door opens, silence. And I just remember Dad going, "Elijah's here." So we won't just have bad Passover memories, which is really good. Rob and Mark said beautiful, beautiful things about Dad. And one of the words that we didn't use to describe him was sentimental, because Dad was not a sentimental guy. Case in point, back in the day when Steel Magnolias was on cable all day, every day, my mom and my sister and I wouldn't pass up an opportunity to watch it, no matter what point we came in, no matter how many times we'd seen it, and Dad was having none of that. What he would do is walk by, poke his head in the bedroom and say, "She dies at the end," and then keep on leaving, which has become part of kind of Brimm lore. And I think that that's probably part of why he always loved opera so much, because, you look at Mimi and Aida and Tosca and Butterfly and Carmen, they all die at the end. So there's got to be some sort of connection there. Dad did have a great sense of humor. When I was born, as a lot of you know, a lot of you were there, I was born with club feet. So at a very, very early age, casts, braces, lots of surgery. And Dad used to love to tell the story of being out and about, me in a stroller, tiny infant, great big casts on my legs. And a woman came by and said, "Oh my goodness, what happened to him?" Without missing a beat, Dad said, "Skiing accident." But wait, it gets better. Because then she took a pause and said, "I didn't know they made skis that small." But that was Dad's sense of humor. It was dry, it was sarcastic, it was well-timed, and always, always, always clever. He loved a good joke, a funny story, even just a clever turn of phrase. And I know a lot of us can remember and will remember his parody lyrics that he wrote for bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and weddings and birthdays, the Purim spiels, which were always his favorites. And, one of his very proudest accomplishments in humor, his play, Pitching Penguins, where he not only got to be a writer, but he got to be a producer, which was something he had always wanted to do. And Dad taught me a lot about humor, about being funny. He taught me my very first joke, which I have to tell. He'd be sad if I didn't, so here it is. What's invisible and smells like carrots? Bunny farts. I said he was clever. I didn't say he was classy. But he, as Rob said, he made sure that everybody around him grew up with the crucial humor, the crucial comedy. So we grew up with the Marx Brothers and Mel Brooks and Woody Allen. We watched Bugs Bunny, where all the best opera happens, I think we can all agree, and the Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy. And we'd love to watch Clash of the Titans and all those great Ray Harryhausen movies. Now, granted, he also took me to the theater to see the South Park movie and Team America, so there's no accounting for taste, but I tell you, we sat there and laughed like idiots the entire time. So Woody Allen it wasn't, but it was worth it. And it wasn't just movies. Dad really loved to read, and one of his all-time favorite books, John Kennedy Toole's A Confederacy of Dunces, which he finally convinced me to read, has now worked its way into my regular rotation, contains gems like, and I quote, "Stop," I cried imploringly to my godlike mind, and "My mother doesn't cook, she burns," which I think you can all hear in Dad's voice. I didn't really do it justice, but he really loved that book, and he loved to laugh, had a great laugh, especially at the expense of his sister on her 16th birthday at Shanghai Lil's, or me standing in wet astonishment after falling into the fountain at the Field Museum, which, Kathy, let's be fair, you laughed just as hard, so it wasn't just Dad. But despite Dad's aversion to sentimentality, he really loved big, and he loved really broadly. He really loved the Eitz Chaim congregation, and I'm so glad that Mom and Dad found them after years of not really having a place that felt like home. And Eitz really was that. He loved volunteering with them at the food pantry. Dad really, really loved all of his friends and colleagues at the Publicity Club of Chicago, some of whom are here. Thank you so much. And they honored him not so very long ago with a Lifetime Achievement Award. He loved all of his wonderful friends, and he and Mom really gifted my sister and I with a huge tribe of bonus aunts and uncles. And you're all here today too. He loved all of his in-laws and his cousins and his nieces and his nephews and all of their children and all of their families. And he really loved his siblings, Jill, Rob, and Kathy, and the sound of their laughter whenever the four of them get together and reminisce about their mom, Grandma Arfarf, Grandma Nanu, to all of you over there, would shake the walls and bring tears of joy to everybody around. He loved me unconditionally and always, but most of all, he loved his girls. Mom and Melissa, they really were his world, and he loved to spoil them rotten. Since we all learned pretty quickly that I was not what you would call an athletic child, he got to do all of his sports stuff with my sister Melissa. So they would watch the Bears game and dip potato chips in mustard and yell at everyone, the Bears and whoever they were playing. They loved to go to Blackhawks games and Cubs games and Bulls games, and they cherished every moment of beer and nachos and me not being there asking them what the hell was going on. And my sister is through and through a daddy's girl and his baby cakes. Dad and Mom met through USY as teenagers when she fell in his lap on a bus. And throughout all those years, he's never stopped catching her when she falls, and they've never stopped holding hands. And they took trips to Europe and Alaska and the Caribbean and, of course, Door County, and trips to Ravinia and to the opera, trips to Indianapolis to see me and Rory on stage, trips way, way far to Vernon Hills to hang out at the pool with Rob and Melissa and Rosie and Taco. And Dad's been there to hold her hand and let her shop for hours and survive emergency pie attacks and protect her from all threats of the International Gilby conspiracy. And he treated my mom like a princess, and he wouldn't have had it any other way. So between all of us, it'll just be our secret that on closer inspection, it was not an aversion to sentiment that really described my dad's life. Instead, it was really a generosity of heart and mind that really enriched everyone that he came into touch with. And I know that he would want to be remembered for that generosity, for his humor, for his intellect, for his kindness. And just as Dr. Mark said, I think that we can all honor him today and moving forward by paying that generosity and that kindness forward to the people that we meet and share a funny story and tell a joke, but not the bunny fart joke, because that one's mine.
Dina.
I want to thank everyone for coming today. And it's so wonderful to see all these beautiful faces out here that are here for my Aunt Gloria, Jeremy, and Melissa. It is a beautiful scene to see so many people that will be here for her. And I thank you guys. I am going to start by reading something on behalf of Melissa. It's a poem that her father would want everyone to hear. Speak of me as you have always done. Remember the good times, laughter, and fun. Share the happy memories we've made. Do not let them wither or fade. I'll be with you in the summer sun and when the winter's chill has come. I'll be the voice that whispers in the breeze. I'm peaceful now. Put your mind at ease. I've rested my eyes and I've gone to sleep. But memories we've shared are yours to keep. Sometimes our final days may be a test, but remember me when I was at my best. Although things may not be the same, please don't be afraid to say my name. Let your sorrow last for just a while. Comfort each other and try to smile. I've lived a life filled with joy and fun. Live on now. Make me proud of what you will become. I'm now going to share a few words on behalf of myself and my mom. I want you all to meet this funny guy. There's a funny guy who was born in Chicago, Illinois on July 13th, 1952, the eldest brother of four, Jill, Rob, and Kathy. He was their guy. He was there for the strength of his young siblings at the time and the support of his family. He loved his siblings. There is a funny guy who was all Chicago. He loved watching the treacherous Chicago Bears, the Blackhawks, the sometime awesome Cubbies. He loves a good super dog, Lou Malnati's deep dish pizza. He loved Italian beef dipped, and of course, Chinese food. There is a funny guy who was so clever, he actually wrote his own play about penguins and managed to get it produced. There's a funny guy that could write you a witty poem in 5 seconds flat. There's a funny guy that could light up a room by his tall stature, ease of speaking, and always a quick joke on hand. It's no wonder he was the president for many years and awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2020 for the Publicity Club of Chicago. There's a funny guy that is 6 foot, 3 inches tall, and somehow managed to find this 4 foot, 11-inch tall, little red-headed whippersnapper back in 1967 at a high school USY mystery bus ride. She literally fell into his lap, and that was the start of his story. True love at first sight. There is a funny guy whose passion was funny movies, old-time movies. Groucho Marx was the favorite. His collection of robots and toys is extremely impressive. There's a funny guy who loved celebrating being Jewish. He very much enjoyed synagogue. He was a member and enjoyed being a member. But in the past 20 years, he found a special place and comfort and loves his Eitz Chaim family. There is a funny guy who had a knack for life and an ease for living it. Everything, and I mean everything, could roll off his back. He was the ground that could find decorum no matter the stressful situation. He was the calm in the chaos. Okay. There is a funny guy. That was Jeremy's biggest cheerleader. Jeremy's fierce backbone, Jeremy's strength and guidance, Jeremy's best advice. There was not a single show or accolade that this funny guy would not let everyone know, hey guys, Jer's in another show. Be it the lead or part of the ensemble, Jeremy always nails it. Or he would share that Jeremy has excelled honors in education, and most recently being so proud of Jeremy to be awarded and recognized and promoted at his job. Jeremy your dad would not think twice about hopping in the car and driving down to see you on any given weekend you would let him. He was so proud of who you are and who you have become in your career, your talented skills for theater, and as the amazing husband you are. There's a funny guy who had a protege 42 years ago. He had a sidekick, and she could do no wrong. She was the apple of his entire being. She was the reason he rolled his eyes and laughed all at the same time. These two were thick as thieves, and her daddy was her almighty figure. He knew Melissa's every move and every reaction. And while he was her biggest cheerleader and often saved her from her own incredible mischief, Melissa was actually his biggest cheerleader. She never left his side through his last breath taken. Melissa never stopped cheering him on. This funny guy was Melissa's idol, her daddy, her entire life being. Forgive me while I digress a moment. Come into my world of perhaps little unicorns and fairies, or it's the only way I found to cope with a deep, painful, devastating loss. But this funny man has a squad waiting for him. He's not alone. He has people up in heaven already. His mom, his dad, his best buddy Danny, and a jolly brother-in-law, my father. He will be met with open arms and pats on the back with excitement and laughter, and I can promise there's a lot of jokes being told at our expense right now. This funny guy, my uncle, David Ross Brimm, may he rest in peace. Your grit this go-around was vigorous, and you earned this day. In our hearts, you went way too soon, but in our minds, we know you are in the right place now. You are at peace and out of pain. You will be forever missed. May your spirit forever be the light that guides the love of your life, that little 4-foot, 11-inch whippersnapper, my Aunt Gloria. Uncle David, you will be remembered for the laughter, the fun, and the blessings you bestowed upon your family and your friends. And here we all sit, my uncle, your friend, your colleague, your brother-in-law, your husband, your dad, the one-of-a-kind, Mr. David Ross Brimm. He sure was one funny guy. Baruch Hashem.
David would have been so proud of everyone who spoke and everyone who communicated their feelings in his family. And David would be thinking, somehow, surprising as it is, each of us today got an extra special look inside of David. Yes, there is the humor, but I think everybody said and everybody communicated so clearly that there was an intense seriousness and love and thoughtfulness underneath every comment and every sarcastic word. David and I shared the same Hebrew school teacher at Hebrew High School, a rabbi littler than Gloria. And David would talk about how this little guy would kick him out more than anybody else in the class. But as I was listening here, I was thinking, did either of them at that time realize that David was probably his best student? Because when David left and went maybe to Little Louie's for some fries, or maybe not, he was thinking about what it meant to think Talmudically. He was thinking about what it meant to ask questions. He was thinking about what it meant to incorporate values and importance into your life. And maybe those things were just too precious to spew forth. But underneath the surface, that's what was always there, which is why I think in our community, David's special place was in the way that his humor didn't take away from a discussion, but moved it forward. It was said David wasn't sentimental, but David was so sentimental. He saw the link of one generation to the next. He saw what tradition was. He would tell me about his uncle who had the store on Roosevelt Road, D. Matros and Sons. And one day, not long ago when we were moving, I was going through old checks from decades ago, and I found from 1973 an $18 check for probably a year's worth of underwear to D. Matros and Sons. And that was a special bond with David, because that linking and that appreciation is what makes life special, is what gives us that extra meaning. And I think each of us is here today appreciating that that's really what we got from David. Sure, we had fun, and we did. And sure, there was the irony, and there was. But there was a feeling that family and community really matter. They care. That's why David would go to the food pantry as well as to the synagogue. That's why David knew what was important. And that's why David learned, even when you thought he was just playing. Each of us at this point has a responsibility. David can no longer act in our world in the same way he could before. And the one prayer we have that's specifically related to mourning is the El Mole Rachamim prayer. And the El Mole Rachamim prayer says that our acts of tzedakah, the acts that we do in this world, are what give him peace in the world to come. We are saying, we know that David can no longer directly act, and we are here today as family and as community to say we take the responsibility so that his life in the Garden of Eden is sustained by the acts and the deeds that we do in our lives for each other, for our own people, and for all humanity. So let's rise for the El Mole Rachamim.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, ומצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת דוד בן אליהו נטע ורחל, שהלך לעולמו. בעבור שבלי נדר ניתן צדקה, ונעשה צדקה ביד הזכרת נשמתו. בגן עדן נהי מנוחתו. לכן בעל הרחמים, בעל הרחמים, יסירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום. ינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
This concludes the service here in our chapel. The interment will take place immediately at the family's plots at Menorah Gardens Cemetery, 2630 South 17th Avenue in Broadview. Following the interment today, the family will be having a gathering at the Milton Clubhouse, 1155 Museum Boulevard in Vernon Hills. That information's on the inside portion of the funeral service you should have received. If you did not receive one, they are available as you depart. I'd also like you to note that what has been placed on our website now is additional Shiva information that will begin on Tuesday at the home of Robert and Anna Brimm. That information, the dates and times as well as service times, is currently on our website. For those of you in attendance, our website is on the back of the service folder, underneath Kaddish, ChicagoJewishFunerals.com. For those of you watching online, you are on the current website to see the information now. I'd also like you to please note in the service folder that the family has asked that memorial contributions be made to Eitzheim Center for Jewish Living. That information's on the service folder and online as well. For those of you going with the family in procession, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker. That sticker should be placed in the front passenger windshield of your car. Please have your bright headlights and flashing hazard lights on at all times. For an additional measure of safety, our staff will be placing magnetic flags on the tops of the vehicles in the procession. We will be driving on surface streets today. Please drive as close as safety permits to the car in front of you at all times. We want to avoid having any large spaces or large gaps in the procession, especially as we pass through the intersections. There'll be a car in the front, obviously. I'll be in the rear car, so we'll keep everybody together as safely as we can. The following individuals have been selected to act as pallbearers. As I call your name, if you'd please step forward. Yaakov Brimm, Robert Wolf, Dina Backenheimer, Rory Shivers Brimm, Moshe Brimm, and Avramel Brimm. At this time, I would ask everyone to please rise as Mr. Brimm and his family and the clergy are escorted from the chapel. Thank you.